as we create a vibrant space where men and women with diverse perspectives gather together to share insight and lessons. This podcast is dedicated to fostering connection, understanding, and growth within our community. Here we believe that while none of us have obtained perfection, together we can cultivate a healthier mindset and nurture the bonds that unite us. Each episode will bring diverse perspectives, encouraging open discussions that inspire, heal, and empower each and every one of us. Whether you're a young woman discovering your identity or a seasoned leader sharing your wisdom or a supportive ally, your thoughts add value. This community welcomes your wholesome perspective as we explore the challenges we face, celebrate our triumphs, and learn from each other. Welcome to the Hearts of Women podcast, where we grow stronger together. So now we are going to begin to get into our questions and our topic for today. And I hope that something that we are saying to you this morning will inspire you, or want you, or entice you to become a part of our community, because we just want to grow stronger together, and that is our goal here today. Now, um, you guys had anything you guys want to say before we get started with our first question?
Take it away.
Take it away. You ready? Okay. Um, okay. So I think this is a really good one, right? Because all of us have this question. We hear so much in the social media arena, but I think this is a good question. So, how does someone identify their strengths and weaknesses? How can you identify them?
Um, well, there's so many, different tests out here that you can take, but a lot of times I think we identify our weaknesses and our strengths when we work, during employment. I know that a lot of my strengths that I identify, like being good at problem solving and being quick to resolve issues, or being customer service oriented and friendly. Those were the things that I enjoy doing. So, of course, those are strengths. I think a lot of times we back away from weaknesses because we're not, either A, we don't want to do it, or B, we're too afraid to be challenged by those weaknesses. And so the same there. I think we identify them in the things that we do, in the books that we read, in the interactions that we have, as well as you can identify those weaknesses and strengths through different tests like Strength Finders 2.0 and so forth.
I would say that we find our strengths and weaknesses through our relationships, through our communities, um, personal and professional. I do understand a lot of times we can measure our minor, major, and material strengths and weaknesses through just the conversations we have. For example, personally, someone can say you're a great listener, or professionally, someone can say that you're very analytical. But also with our relationships, we can identify some of our weaknesses. Sometimes we can be impatient with people, and sometimes we can also not be as attentive as we should be. So I think our relationships, personal and professional, sometimes give us a measure of our strengths and weaknesses.
I agree. I agree, and I saw in the comments someone said feedback from others. I think that's important. That we listen to the people who we're in relationship with, and try to and humble ourselves so that we can, if we desire to grow, and if we want to identify our strengths and our weaknesses. One of the things that I said to my son who just graduated, I suggested that he do the DISC assessment. Because all of us have some strengths and weaknesses. I remember years ago going to an interview, and it was like, "Well, what are your weaknesses?" And I said, "I don't have any." I know. I thought, I thought I was being. I don't have any. That's because I was not self-aware. Okay, and so a lot of times we can go into these environments, and I think that the DISC assessment was so very helpful for me because it made me examine myself. It made me consider it. I first initially rejected it, right? And then I said, okay, 2 weeks later, I came back and I said, okay, let me see if any of these things apply to me. And so as I humbled myself and read over it again, because it was it was a long, I think it was 27-page report that it was very lengthy, but it was very detailed. And so it helped me to identify my weaknesses and the things that I can do to improve them. And so that was so important for me. So I was saying the same thing to my son. I was like, now that you're preparing to go into the workplace, it would be a good idea for you to go and do an assessment so you can identify some of your strengths and weaknesses. And I think the most important thing about doing these personality or development assessments is that we're honest, because we're not going to get genuine, true feedback for ourselves to help us to identify some of the things that we may be, our strengths and our weakness. So I think that is a good way for us to, and then feedback sometimes, although it's necessary, a lot of us will respond the same way that I did when I was looking at that DISC assessment. I don't have no weaknesses. That ain't me. Some of us will respond the same way because we are not willing or open to, to really examine ourselves. And that's what the Word of God tells us that we should do. Do you have any other comments about this particular question?
Or do you think that we are unwilling to open ourselves up to feedback and or quote unquote criticism?
Well, I think that's it. We don't want the criticism. And I think that it's the way that we look at it, right? Versus us saying, someone cares enough about me to take the time to say, well, this is what I see, right? And then we'll get defensive and we don't want to hear it because we feel like they're attacking us as a person. But it's not that they're attacking us as a person. They're just helping us to realize that there's something in us that we can work on. If they, we care about us and we're in community, of course, it's someone we're in relationship with. So I think it's the aspect of feeling criticized, I think.
You're on mute.
I would say judgment as well. A lot of times we spend so much time covering up our inaccuracies or our weaknesses that when people can see through our attempts to cover them, it kind of takes us off guard. Like, how did you know that? But instead of coming out saying, you're right, this is something that I need to work on, we automatically get defensive because we spent so much time trying to cover it up. I think once you have a trusted relationship with someone who's giving you back positive and or negative feedback, and you're being honest and transparent with yourself, right? Taking accountability for our own weaknesses, then it becomes easier to accept those critiques of the things that we so desperately try to cover up.
Yes. I'm thinking we have to, do an inventory of ourselves. When someone is sharing with us some insight, our blind spots, right? When someone is sharing that with us, we have to sit down and take the time to do an inventory and examine ourselves and be honest with ourselves. Because why not? If you're not going to be honest with anybody else, why not be honest with yourself? Because it's not going to, it's for you. It's just like you going to the doctor and you're not telling them everything that's wrong with you because you don't want them to know and you think you can fix it. But if you could, you wouldn't need to go to the doctor. So I think we should take the time to be honest with ourselves. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we lie to ourselves because we don't want to experience the conviction, or well, maybe not conviction, but maybe we feel as condemnation or being criticized. So have you ever experienced any of those aspects where you feel like you may feel like you're being criticized if someone is sharing something with
you? Of course, but I would have to say it's based on their tone or how they're sharing it. If it sounds like it's malicious intent, just to be coming after me, and or if it's really constructive criticism, because some people can choose to have a perspective of you, and of course there's blind spots, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's you, or it doesn't make it a quality that you have. And then the other side to that is you wouldn't notice mine if you didn't have it yourself.
Nope.
And
Take it out your eye, right? Take the beam out.
yeah, that's right. Take the plank out your eye before you try to come and take the plank out mine. So absolutely, although I appreciate feedback and genuine feedback and being authentic about what you're saying to me, but I take it into consideration. So what applies, I keep, and what don't apply, I keep moving.
Okay.
I agree with that. Chew up the meat and spit out the bones, right? I think everybody has an opinion. Everybody will give their opinion of you and their assessment of you. And sometimes those opinions don't come from a trusted source. If you haven't built a relationship with that person, sometimes they can tell you something about yourself that you can let go in one ear and out the other. But I think once you have that trusted relationship with someone, and they are critiquing you and giving you things that you need to work on, I think once you have that trusted relationship, it allows you to drop that guard. And you may not necessarily change it right then, because I'm guilty. I'll put it on my list. But as time goes on, it kind of starts to wear on you, kind of starts to work on your subconscious, and you can become convicted of those things. And then it gives you the ability to start to change and make some changes in those arenas that have been pointed out to you. But as we know, some people, they just want to give their opinion of you. And, sometimes graciously, you just have to say, okay, and move on. And sometimes they're valid, sometimes they're not. It just really does depend on the delivery and the trusted relationship you have with that person.
So this makes me think about delivery and tone, because I'm learning, right, that if it's true or a fact, if it's something, that means I have to go and discover what's being said, even if it's not delivered to me, right? Because at first I was like, well, I can't hear you. I was shut down. I'm not going to hear anything you say because of the way that you're saying it, right? So I would just shut down and wouldn't receive it. Then there was times when I would receive the information that was not given to me in the tone that I wanted it, but you heard me say I wanted it, right? But as I thought about it, even though it didn't maybe come from that trusted source, I still had to go consider what was being said, right? And so I think there's those moments that do happen, that we shouldn't just always initially reject something, but maybe consider, because that was a big thing for me. The way you say it to me, your tone, and my feelings would get hurt. But if it was true, when I learned later on, I had to at least consider it, And so that's what I begin to learn to do. That doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen sometime. And of course, we want to be in a community where we have trusted sources and people that we're in relationship that we trust. But sometimes you're going to get the raw, uncut, unfiltered information that will jolt you into saying, okay, maybe I need to consider this. Maybe.
I don't disagree with that. And I am a tone person. So also I'm a direct person. So I am willing to listen to someone until they get to the place where they're completely out in left field, and then I stop listening. So, but it is how you come at a person. You can't just say, well, you're just mean and hateful, but you don't even know anything about me. How I could be direct, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm mean. I'm just direct. So you do take that into consideration, but again, it's the source that it's coming from, because everyone does not always have the best intentions, right?
So I want to see some of these comments that are made, empowering perspective and poor man's Dr. Phil. They are in the chat like, okay, he said, how the poor man's Dr. Phil? Do you mind putting that up? Both of them, Empowering Perspective and Poor Man Dr. Phil's comments. Coach said, one of the things I learned in the Army is that some of the best information I needed to hear wasn't delivered in a manner that I liked. Okay. And then, we got our resident comedian. Bad news isn't better with sugar on top, and it doesn't get better with time. Okay. I agree with that. I agree. I wouldn't say bad news. I would say information that we need to hear. And a lot of times, as Coach said, the delivery may not be what we want, but it is something that we need. Okay, so we got a question. Miss Ravon, not Miss Ravon, I'm sorry. Miss Lavon, can you please read the question for us?
How can you help someone that is trying to project their image on you?
That's a good question.
I'm going to first let y'all ladies answer, because helping someone, I can help someone return to themselves instead of projecting their image on me. But graciously so, you know what I'm saying? I mean, okay. I have to look at them. I have to listen to what they're saying. And then I'll ask them, are you referring to me or are you referring to yourself? So I need to identify, well, who are we talking about here? And what is this image? Because I'm not familiar with it. That doesn't mean that it's not me. That doesn't mean that it might not be a part of me. But normally when someone is projecting their image on you, it has nothing to do with you.
That's right.
In my opinion.
He said, give it back to him, huh?
They can have it all. I mean, do they need me to put it in a pretty box and I'm willing.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I tell you I love the Love Doctor, because she's going to deliver it to you at your front door, whether you like it or not. But I love that about her. I struggle with this, how to return it to them. I try to walk in kindness, right? But you also understand the energy that people are actually speaking to you in. And sometimes when they're projecting their own issues onto you, I try to immediately consider the source and give them just the extra teaspoon of grace. When I say, stop, that's ridiculous. I've literally had to have that conversation a few months ago. Like, just stop, that's ridiculous. And say, I understand that you're hurting. Like, I get that you're hurting. But what you're saying to me has absolutely nothing to do with me. You didn't like the delivery of the information. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. But automatically trying to project their image or what they're dealing with, or even going on attack mode to someone, is just not acceptable. But I got to learn to put it in the Dr. Love way, because I think it's better received in that direction. But I do think that you just need to redirect the conversation. That would be the way that I would handle it today.
Okay. So I see in the comment, one of the things that Nodella and the Empowering Perspective were saying is, by having an open and honest conversation of their behavior, people aren't always aware of that, especially in this world of having lost their identity. And I think that is really good. And the response to that, exactly, one of the biggest things that I would ask, says Coach, to that question is whether or not I am called to help that person. And so we can put the original question back up, if you don't mind. So the question was that how can you help someone that is trying to project their image onto you? Well, I think I'm going to quote a little bit of what Dr. Love said. That's their image. That's their projection. It's not ours. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. We try to take on other people's suggestions. about us as individuals. The Word of God tells us as individuals to cast your cares on me, for I care for you. So if someone has an issue and they're trying to project something onto you, you don't have to receive it. And I think what Adrian was saying, that you don't even have to have that conversation with them. Not that we're trying to be rude, but you have to be mindful of at all times that once you have your armor on, we're gonna go through that one day. Once you have your armor on, then when we see these devices come up, we know how to address them and handle them. So I think this is a really good question, because and I like the way that it's asked, and I think that we have to be mindful of helping someone that is trying to project how can someone project something of them onto you? I mean, to me, that's just simple. So for me, it's the first thing I would do is reject it, give it back, as Dr. Love said. That's what I would do. Okay. So this is our second question. What methods can we use to gain insight into our own behaviors and motives? This is a good one. And I think we touched on this a little bit already, but I think this is a good one.
What methods can be used to gain insight to your own behaviors? I know that one of the things that I do is I reflect. I reflect on conversations. I could have handled that better. What was my intentions on how I responded? Was it because it was real what they said and I didn't like it? I didn't like the tone. I didn't like the statement. Was I convicted? I look at myself. I look in the mirror and identify. For example, no, I did not. I honestly can say at this big old age, I did not learn to appreciate no until maybe 3 months ago. Okay. Telling me that was like the world was falling, the sky was falling, everything was coming to an end. What do you mean no? Until I realized that there is protection in no. Just because it's no, it doesn't mean that it's no forever. It just means sometimes that it's no for right now. So I had to look at my behavior when I was told no. At that moment, like, wow, I'm a real piece of work. I had to get real with myself. And what was my motivation behind not wanting to be told no? Was it that I felt like I was being rejected? Did it feel like I was unworthy? And so I think that we really have to look inside and at the inner man and reflect on those things and how we respond and behaviors and our motivations.
Honestly, having that real, honest, transparent conversation with yourself. If we can be real for a minute, I call myself the recovering drama queen because I already know how I used to be. So when I decided that what I was doing was not working, right? I had to really and truly be honest with myself. I have that mirror conversation with myself and say, this is the list of things I need to work on, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody pointing out something to me that I need to work on does not require me sliding down the wall. It makes it worse. It makes it be the point where I'm covering it up. Like it's just another way to deflect from what the issue is. And so I might start sliding, but I'm going to stop, right? And say, you know what? They're right. Let me write that down on my list of things I need to work on. These are things that I need to focus on every day about improving. And even if I don't get it all right, and a lot of stuff, we're being, honest to ourselves, we have improved, but we still don't have it all the way right. But it's that walk into fixing those things about yourself. But you cannot even begin to do that without having that honest and transparent mirror conversation with yourself.
I just have something quickly to say. The image of you sliding down the wall with your arms plastered out to the side is just hysterical. So if I go off camera for a moment to have a moment of laughter, please forgive me.
If I can be real honest, my best one is sliding off the couch. Y'all, I promise y'all, if I could just take you to that moment.
Okay. I did want to add something here. I'm going to add a little bit more. So I think working with a therapist or a coach, I know that's not something that's popular in our community, but I know it has been life changing for me. Someone who can provide a safe place or space for you to explore your thoughts and be honest. And then, tracking our behavior. I think we mentioned that earlier, because when you keep a log of your behavior and your emotions in various situations, over time, you're going to begin to see these patterns, right? And they will reveal some of your underlying behavior. And I think that that's real important, that we are always doing the inventory. And you're going to hear that a lot, because there is no time when there is a situation that is happening in our life that we are not responsible for part of it. And so we have to always do the self-examination. And I think that when we have someone, a professional, a mentor, coach, who can help us navigate through it in a place where we can be honest, I think that it's something that is beneficial to us. I shared earlier about my earlier processes about, starting my professional development and personal development. It wasn't easy to look at myself, but then when I began to do it and began to see some significant differences, it made a world of difference. The way that I looked at the world, made a difference. The way I conceptualized information that I was receiving, it made a big difference. So sometimes those professionals, all the time, honestly, those professionals can help us identify some underlying behavior that we are not aware of. Again, a blind spot. Anything else you want to say about this particular question? Okay. Adrian, can you address this question and read it?
Sure. How will I know honestly when honesty is not the norm? Ooh, that's a good one, Crystal.
Ooh. I'm gonna take this one. How will I know honesty when honesty is not, honestly, I guess that's when honesty is not the norm. So we have a metric where we can gauge information that we're receiving or the environment that we're in, right? And so that if we're gauging that information by a set of criteria and principles that we live by, I think that's how you can gauge it, honestly and genuinely. Because once you identify these principles that you live by, and they don't line up with this information that you're receiving, then again, that's a point where we have to I'm not going to say immediately reject it, but I am going to say address it if you're in relationship with that person. Other than that, it's just information. Everybody has it. That's my thought to the question.
How will I know honesty when honesty is not the norm? It poses another question for me. Do you know the truth when you hear it?
Yeah.
When you hear the truth, even though it might not be what you like, is it convicting? If it's not convicting, if you don't see any truth in it, then you know that it's not honest. And or when you do see the truth in it, then if there's some truth in it, then there's an honest portion of it. So I think it's really about knowing the truth when you hear it and knowing a lie when you hear it as well.
Okay. I've seen a comment in here made by Dr. Phil. He said, honesty is layered and not just black and white. So I believe that it can be layered, but I believe that principles and precepts are what they are. When you identify and filter them through the principles and precepts, then you can identify them. Either you're going to keep them or you're going to reject them. That's what I'm thinking when I hear that layered, because I think it gives room for you to say that there's an exception to the rule. If I say this is layered, or what purpose are you giving me this information? If you can give me a little bit more on that, poor man's Dr. Phil, I would appreciate that.
I would also go out to say that I think there's so much deflection when things affect us. You know, we constantly make excuses for the things that are happening around us. And some of the best advice I ever got from Coach was, what part of that did you have control over? Or what part of that did you participate in? And if you can answer that question, that is having an honest conversation with yourself. It don't feel good at all. If you ain't done it, I'm telling you, it don't feel good. But that's honesty.
Yeah.
If I have to say, well, he did it, or she did it, or they did it, or it happened, what part of that did I play?
What part? Because you did a part. There was a part you had in it. And you know, and to your point, I just wanted to add that, you know, even when, you know, I was divorced, right? God gave me a time where I can do some reflection, right? And it was a time where I was like, no one, he was not 100% wrong in it, right? Because that's a lot of the narrative. If somebody's divorced, we try to find a way why they were wrong, right? But we don't consider, and I think it's the most important thing for us to do, is to consider our part in it. Because now that person is going on with their life. They're going, leading their life, remarrying, creating more families. So why are you spending so much energy focused on that person when you need to take the time to become self-aware and help yourself to grow? Take accountability for your part in it so that you can be healthy and grow and be better and healed. So I think a lot of times, even though that was not a comfortable not understanding awareness that God gave me, is something that I had to consider. So I do agree with you, Adrian. So we have a few more comments here involving me being honest about my perception of the truth while understanding that, okay, involved me being honesty about my perception of the truth while, okay. That's why I love this. Okay, that's the second part of it. That's why I love this question, because there is a difference between facts, assumptions, and opinions. To understand the difference leads the opportunity to be honest. The first level of honesty involves, excuse me being honest about my perception of the truth while understanding that it's jaded by my thoughts. Excuse me. This also Okay. So I like that opinion. Yes, it was layered, and my throat is, excuse me. It was layered, and all these aspects as far as projecting and my truth, because there's only one truth, right? There's only one truth, and I think that is what we have to always filter everything through. Okay, there's a question for Adrian.
When blaming others, isn't that projecting? Absolutely. I think that's our first human response. Well, let me make it personal. That was my first human response. It was somebody else's fault, right? Until I decided that it can't be everybody else's fault, and I'm the one that's feeling like this. I feel, horrible, or I feel like, I've been done wrong. Well, if you feel like that, why do you feel like that? And if it's someone else's fault, then why is it that I felt like that? Like, those are really the questions that I had to sit and answer and ask myself, because I had something to do with it. So yes, I believe that when you do blame others, that is projecting. Not saying that other people may not have had a part in it, but there's a part that you control, and that's you. So what about it? You allowed yourself to continue to go through that, continue to experience that, or allow that to happen. And if it's completely out of your control, then, then you can self-assess and, move differently from that point on, use that as a lesson. But yes, projection I think blaming other people is definitely projection.
Now this is a good one because this reminds me of community, right? So I really do like this question. And when I began to unpack it, there was so much that we can do in community to be helpers to one another, um, directly and indirectly. So if you don't mind tackling this one, Dr. Love, or do you want me to go first?
I'm open. The question is, how can we support one another in this journey?
Mm-hmm.
I think really by having open, and honest conversations. It goes back to the last question, and having enough empathy and compassion to be able to hear what the other person is saying, even if it doesn't feel good, and really beginning to have the conversations that we don't really want to have. The conversations about what those weaknesses are. We can talk all day about our strengths, but what are our weaknesses, or what are the things that we don't like, or why do we not like to hear no? I think by having the unwanted conversations, I think we can support each other better on our journey because it allows us to find out about ourselves, and the things that we need to work on and or correct.
Okay. I think I will add to this. I think being present. Sometimes, I've heard this in our community when Hearts and Men talk. Sometimes, just being there, and then for women as well, just being there, um, doing the good, and then there's good times as well, and they're not so good times. So just your presence can be offered as comfort. I think that is a great aspect that we don't consider a lot, but being there and being present can offer comfort to someone else. Active listening, not giving opinion, just listening and being interested in what the other person is saying. And I think lastly, sharing resources, providing helpful information, tools, um, or offering connections to other people so that they can begin to create goals for themselves, and overcome some of the challenges they may be facing currently. Hey,
I would say having that community around you that gives you various aspects of levels of support. This community in particular, I get to bounce off a lot of things with my sisters. Lisa, being a mentor to me, has allowed me to understand my responsibility and my role as being a king's daughter. And she is constantly, correcting me right to left to make sure that if I'm leaning, that my sister is straightening up my crown. I can have real, raw, gritty conversations with me and the love doctor, because she understands me on a different level. And in your community, there's not going to always be a one size fit all. You have to understand that there are ways, different personalities that you are able to continue on your journey, that they will continue to help self-correct you, as well as cheer you on when you are definitely making milestones and growing closer to the Most High. And also, I will say this, as a single woman, I have what I call my defense crew, right? They're my community. And they are friends I've had for a long time in that masculine energy that is nothing but support and understanding that in this world, they require me to have a certain level of respect and to walk in that, just when I'm outside. So having my defense, having my sisters, having my mentor, having my coach, having all these wonderful people in this community that give me various insight on me correction and cheering. I think you need all of that in your community. And that's how we support each other on this journey.
Was saying that removing the judgment, because if you don't mind putting that comment up, remove the judgment, because that can be a huge issue. People are less apt to share or be vulnerable when judgment is present. And I love that. It's not our place to do that anyway. You know, our biggest responsibility is for us to examine ourselves. Now, if we're in relationship, you know, we do have to, and we are in relationship with each other and we know each other, we do have to correct or rebuke each other sometimes. That's a part of being in a relationship. God chastens those he loves. So when we're in relationship with each other, sometimes that is something that we have to do. And then there's that time when we need to remove judgment. There's another scripture, I'm sorry. You know, I always use the scriptures to help me in my life journey. that tells us that we are to judge all things, not people. That's God's responsibility, right? So we can identify the behavior in each other, but it's not our responsibility to judge. We can share with each other that, you know, now you know that that behavior is not conducive to who you say you are, right? And then that's us being helpers to one another who we're in relationship with. Any comments to that?
My 15-year-old son, we were having a conversation. We were on a road trip, and I made a statement, and he said, you know, that was kind of some judgment there. Do you realize that there's a lot of people that are not happy about what they've done? So judging them makes no sense to judge them. And I just found the fact in it. We all have done something that we're not proud of. So judgment should never be and come out of our mouths, if you will. That's not meant for us to do, although we are to judge all things. As you said, not judge people and what they do. So I agree, definitely.
I would say just one other thing to piggyback off the Voice's reply to that. Not necessarily, well, I don't want to say necessarily, but also when you're on a journey with someone and with your sister or with your brother, it's not necessarily who you say you are, but who you want to be. Because some things that we are being identified in our behavior, if we're honest and we're being in our human, we don't really understand that it may be an issue. And then when someone points it out and it's like, well, that's who you say you are, it's like, but I don't want to be that. So then it starts to kind of work on you, because it's not a switch change, right? You have to kind of examine it. It has to actually convict you. And, you know, I'm famously will tell you like, yeah, but they ain't convicted me yet. I'll say that, right? But then something else will come up and I'll say, well, yeah, but not. Okay, now it's starting to bother me, because it didn't bother me last month. And I don't have a problem telling you it didn't. But it would be like, no, I really shouldn't be doing this. Let me see if I can start to, you know, do something different. What tools can I put into place to when I find myself going that direction? Because I do want to go here, right? But I'm comfortable here. So what is the journey looking like? How do I start to turn the corner to do something different? Because it's just not as realistic to say, okay, you're right. That's not who I say I am. I'm going to cut that off altogether. That's just not how life's journey works. But just identifying some of those things, and it may not start immediate, you know, but it will start with the conviction of the Holy Spirit. It will start to work on you. It will really start to bother you, some of the things that you were so comfortable doing before. You're on mute, sis.
I thought it was me.
My apologies. I know I was trying to make sure that I muted, because I know there was a little feedback earlier. So I have a Coach says, I have a question. Why does it appear that supporting is easier for women than men? So that's a good question. We've seen it in the church, the organizations, and etc. Who wants to tackle this question? Anyone
I
have
don't
any?
know about easier.
I was just about to say,
Huh?
I don't know about easier.
You said you ain't gonna mess with it? Okay.
No,
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't know about easier either.
Mhm.
I think that honestly, if I look out into the world and I look at the dynamic of men and I look at the dynamic of women, yes, we have our girlfriends and that's great support. And but there's a lot of cattiness there. There's still a lot of among women. I think that men do great at supporting each other, but that's on the outside looking in. I'm not a man. I think that some, not all. I think that you guys find a way to hold each other accountable for your actions. Where we as women, we go out to hold each other accountable, and you ain't the boss of me, and the whole hand movement and the neck movement, and I got an attitude, and I'm not talking to her, and she get on my nerves. I don't know if it's easier for women. I can't really say that it's easier. It can be challenging, a lot challenging, more than you may see.
I echo Dr. Love. Women relationships that are not, and then when they're not in right relationships can be difficult. And I don't know if deflection comes naturally for us, but you can have in a conversation with in feminine energy, just correction or just pointing something out very simply. If they don't even like what you're saying, you could be talking about the weather. They don't like the way you're saying it, they will deflect and it will turn to an attack mode sometimes. But there are all different types of course, personalities and relationships amongst them. I personally, as a woman, find it much easier with men sometimes because I feel like I can kind of communicate clearer and I can get more correction or direction easier for me without the, all the things that we love to deflect to, like, I don't like your hair, your shoes and stuff like that. So I find it easier sometimes to even have those conversations amongst men. So I don't know if it's easier. I think it's just different.
I like that he put in parentheses appear. I think relationship matters in this aspect. That we can support each other, we can have conversations with each other. I would say we can have conversations with each other. We can join and come together with each other. Is it always supportive? Not always. I think the same thing applies in relationship with men. It's not always supportive. It's not always genuine, but then there's times when it is. And so I think that's something that we have to be mindful of and we have to look at. Now, when you said it appears that way and you see it in the churches and organizations, one thing that came to me was there are more so women in the church, right? They outnumber the men in the church, which we know should not be so, but they are. And women, even though we don't say it, even though we don't want to own it, we desire that leadership in direction, the order that God has given us. I'm going to speak for me, but I there are so many women. There was a YouTube channel where there was a pastor who came on and said, if there's any women who in this church who have joined this church because you think I'm gonna be your husband, just get that out your mind. So women are seeking covering, I think, And that's in this aspect. And I think that's why there's so many women that go to church in groves. Um, and even those, some of those women are married and don't understand the importance of leadership within their household versus their church. So that's a whole different conversation. But that's one of the things that came to me. Any thoughts from that comment?
I just want to add that what Adrian said, as far as seeking out the conversations or the support women to men, I think men just come right out and say it. They're just honest and they're blatant. And that's what a lot of us, I know me, would rather have, instead of the sheltering or trying to guard my feelings because you're a woman and you don't want to be real about it. I don't care much for those types of relationships. So when I call and ask you a question, I want a direct answer. So support me in that way. Support me with being honest. Support me with the truth. Be supportive so I can be supportive as well. And so as far as the appearance of, I think you're right with that word, appearance, because it appears to be, but it's definitely, I think it's the opposite. I think I find more support and reliance and from a male's standpoint, because they're more honest. Not all of them, because they lie too, but I'm just saying.
I could agree with Lisa. I think it is just the appearance. From an organizational standpoint, I think sometimes women tend to be a little bit more the worker bees. You know, you find us in kitchen committees and, you know, fundraising committees and all that kind of things. But you also find a lot of organizationally wise that the men tend to be able to collaborate funding better. And they're able to project and plan outwardly better. So I think we just appear differently to each other, but we have some of the same struggles as well. And that's very evident when you're looking at church and organizations.
We're going to jump down to our second to our last question. Crystal, I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep calling Crystal. I guess because I see her in the chat so much. Levon, if you could put that question up, what strategies do you use to receive and process feedback constructively? Yeah. So I want to jump down to this question because I think it's a good place for us to talk about more. This whole conversation is about self-awareness, right? And it's our responsibility at all times to examine ourselves, be thoughtful about the conversations that we're having, and also consider our ways in the environments that we're in, and be mindful to listen to information that we are hearing and that may be beneficial for us. The table is spread. There's a whole bunch of stuff on it. You just take what you need from it, right? And sometimes we got to get them vegetables and fruits off of it, you know, as well. Not only the fried chicken. But I wanted to just delve into this question because what strategies? So we have to have a process and we have to be thoughtful. We have to think about this. Can we use to receive and process feedback constructively? I know it may seem like a simplistic question, but as I began to go into this question, there were so many things that came up that I began to think about. You know, receiving constructive feedback is not easy, as we talked about in the very beginning of this show. So, what strategies can we use to receive and to process that information?
I tend to keep my mouth shut.
Okay.
I listen more.
Okay.
And I process. I don't always come off responding at first. And sometimes I can get so silent that you would think that I'm not listening. But one of my strategies is definitely listening to receive what's being stated instead of having a feeling behind what's being stated, especially when I know it's coming from a genuine place. Um, so I embrace feedback. And I probably embrace it so much because I give a lot of constructive feedback, especially in the business that I'm in. So my biggest strategy, I would have to say, that has benefited me the most is listening. You have to be willing to listen, and I'm not just talking about hearing. I'm talking about truly and listening for the cues, the triggers. Just the listening aspect is integral in this. Is very important in this question.
Let me ask another question. Do you think in that aspect of feedback, constructively, do you think asking questions to truly understand what the individual is saying? Because sometimes, what we can do is we can think it's personal and it's something that someone is saying about us versus our behavior. So do you think it's important? One of the things I think is so important that I've learned is that I have to ask questions. If I'm receiving feedback because of maybe something someone sees in me who I'm in relationship with, and I'm not quite understanding what they are saying or relaying to me, then you have to ask questions clear, and then they need to be able to give you a response, a clear, decisive response to what they are constructively, sharing with you. Do you find that that could be helpful in this particular instance?
I mean, clarity is everything. Absolutely. So, in my listening, in processing, I am asking those questions to myself. So then I can turn around and ask questions for clarity if they are in fact needed. But a lot of times that when we're receiving feedback and it's constructive feedback, most of the time we either ask for it, and even if we don't ask for it, and it's being given, most people that are giving you feedback, I would say, in my life, would have to make that point, are those people that are close enough to me to be able to give me that feedback, because you're not going to know anything about me unless I let you in anyway. So I would have to venture out to say that is the biggest thing for me. But yes, clarity is everything. Without clarity, then you're just making assumptions yourself. So you might not even be able to process the feedback that's being given to you.
Okay.
For me, the way I used to process this information was from ears straight to my feelings, right? And when I understood that that was incorrect, because I haven't processed the information, I put in steps to listen, to receive the information, then to process the information, then to filter the information, and then list it. Because even once you filter it, sometimes you're still in a point, or maybe it's just me, you're still at a point where you're like, I don't quite know if it sounds valid, but I'm not really ready for that. Let me put that on my list. And as I've gone along in my journey, things have happened, and it brings back into memory things that people have said to me. That's why they're on my list. Until once they are sometimes re-triggered, then I can start to process those for correction. But I had to learn that everything somebody says to me should not hurt my feelings. And that came with maturity and growth along this journey. So once I hear the information and I process that. But what I try to do is, just to go back to your question a little bit, Lisa, about asking questions for clarity. I have to process the information I'm giving first. If I don't understand it, then I ask questions. I do find that a lot of people will start to question you before they've actually processed what you've said. So you end up saying the same thing 4 or 5 times, and it's frustrating. Then you almost will shut down a conversation because it's like you're not even hearing me. So sometimes I think the sitting to process what has been said first and then re-questioning it can bring a little bit more clarity and cohesiveness to the conversation. It's like asking a question, and the answer to the question is to ask a question, and the answer to the question is to ask. Like, you're going in circles, nobody's getting anywhere, and everybody's getting frustrated. So if there's a period of processing, then yes, to ask the questions for additional clarity. But sometimes it just becomes a battle of who can ask as many questions as possible without actually listening and hearing each other.
So that sounds like a whole bunch of confusion. So in that aspect, it could possibly be that those individuals are not trying to have authentic conversations to help each other to grow. And I know that sometimes, when you're getting constructive feedback back, you may need to go for a day or so. For me, I can always go back to me, use myself as an example. I think it took me 2 weeks to go back to my mentor and say, okay, all right, I see some of the things in here, because I was holding on to, this is not me, because I had this vision of myself, right? I'm a good person. I try to treat people right, but that has nothing to do with what information was being shared with me. That had nothing to do. But I was rejecting it, not understanding that, you may think you're a good person, right? But the only goodness in you is God, is the Most High. That's His Holy Spirit that abides in us. That's what's good in us. We don't do things to be helpful to each other because we're good people. We do it because the Holy Spirit abides on the inside of us. He helps us to exhibit the characteristics of God. So I had to learn so much. I had to unpack so much when I would receive this feedback, because I was initially just rejecting it because of what I thought about myself. All those blind spots it was a whole bunch. I was walking around, needing some help. But that is one of the things and then I found that, asking questions for clarity, and this can be helpful. If a person is giving you feedback, they need to really understand before they even come to you, right? To have the conversation, what they're saying, be able to clearly identify it to you so that you can ask questions to get understanding. And I think that's a really important aspect of this as well. Any other questions or comments on this particular question? I did want to add this. I think this can be one of the most difficult aspects of receiving constructive criticism, is being thankful for and showing gratitude for the person who is giving you feedback, because it's not always easy to give feedback, because you know that you may receive some rejection or some pushback, but then you have to recognize that they care about you, because they took the time to share with you what they saw. And a lot of times that's not easy to do, to go to someone that you're in a relationship with and you care, for them to come and have a conversation with you and say, I've identified these patterns of behavior, and can we talk about it? And then, that's not easy. It's always good to show gratitude. And then if you need to go back to have additional conversation, do that, and that process for me was with my mentor, my coach. So that was very helpful for me. Anything else, you guys?
I think along the journey of your journey to betterment, self-discovery, when the person you're in relationship with that points out that thing that you kind of need to work on and correct, when they can then say, I've noticed that change in you. I've noticed that stillness in you. I can tell that you've been working and you've really been doing some self-reflection. Having that pinnacle moment where you can have that conversation saying, thank you, I appreciate you pointing that out to me, is so beneficial, because it reminds us that we're all still human, we're all still working, and that as you are on this journey, as you know, this journey is not easy, but just to have somebody point those things out and showing your growth and your maturity, and also your walk, is so important, and you become so grateful for that person in your life and what they've been able to impart into you through the Holy Spirit. I know that I am so grateful for the relationships that I have built in this community for that reason. So publicly, I would like to say thank you to you all, but I love that, having that connection and that relationship where they can say, I see that in you. You're on mute, sis.
You've been on mute for a while. We didn't hear nothing.
Y'all supposed to tell me, y'all. I'm over here trying to multitask. Yeah. So this is the last question. I'm sorry. So we have about 15 more minutes or so before we finish up. And I thank you guys so much for being here. Everyone in the chats have been so supportive, and I am so thankful for this first premiere episode, and all the information that we are sharing. I hope is helpful for someone who is listening. And also I wanted to mention that Coach did put a disassessment link in the chat for anyone who thinks they may want to do an assessment for themselves. Personal, professional development is always good. We're always growing. We're ever learning. And so I think that's good if it's something that you desire and you want to do for yourself. So this is going to be our last question. And then after this question, we're going to go into our final thoughts. And we're going to let Adrian go, then Dr. Love, and then I will finish it out after this question, okay? Just want to give us some order. So this last question, what are some common barriers to self-awareness that people face? One of the things I guess I'll start this one up. One of the things that I thought about was the over identification. Sometimes we may overly identify with our roles as far as jobs or our titles or even being parents, which can obscure our identity. And I think that a lot of times this is what causes us to have some of the conflict that we have within ourselves, because we're identifying ourselves with things and not who God is, who abides and who lives on the inside of us. And so that's one of the things that I thought about. And of course, we've talked so much about biases and blind spots, and lack of support. We've talked about that as well. When when we are in an environment, and this is some of the barriers that we will face. We're in an environment where self-expression is muzzled. Then we won't be encouraged to. We don't find that's a safe space. And then we may isolate ourselves, and that can hinder our journey. So those are some of the things that I thought about when I thought about the common barriers to self-awareness that some people face, the conflict that we experience within ourselves because of what we're learning and what we currently know. So I wanted to give you guys some of my thoughts so that we can go ahead and talk about this a little bit more and get some of your insight as well.
I think some of the common barriers to self-awareness is fighting your norm, fighting your routine, and also fighting your comfort zone. Okay. A lot of times, those barriers that we have are because we've become comfortable in who we pretend to be. And being out of or getting uncomfortable to get better, people sometimes don't really want to do that. It's too much work. It's too hard. But when the calling is there, right, everything becomes uncomfortable when your calling is stronger. So the Holy Spirit makes even what you would consider to be comfortable and routine not so comfortable and routine anymore. So I think that's one of the biggest common barriers to being self-aware, that things in your life need to be shaken up and be changed and be tweaked and all the things, is that routine is so comfortable to remain in.
I need to take it back just a little bit further. I agree with what both of you ladies have said. However, I think the common barriers that we experience with becoming self-aware is really believing what others told us when we were children, taking that on as our own and never really going outside of that. If my mother said it, it has to be true. If my grandmother said it, it has to be true. That doesn't make it true. What is your relationship with the Most High, and what does He say? Who does He say you are? What does He say you are? What does He say your purpose is and what you're meant to be? And I think that we tend to become comfortable in what others have stated instead of actually running out there. I guess I shouldn't say running, but running out there to find out our own self-awareness. How does this apply to me? Does this really work for me? Just because I was raised this way doesn't mean that it works. My grandfather used to say, what worked yesterday will still work today. It may, but not necessarily, because we are different people today, and those things just don't work. So I think that the common barriers that I have seen and still see is that we place labels and titles and things on our children, and we expect them to live up to that and never truly find themselves. And so I think that the identity issue is what we're doing to the children and not so much of what they're doing to themselves, except for actually not going out to find out who they are versus what they were told.
Can you put Coach's comment up here? He said one of the most common barriers is thinking that you know who you are. Coach, could you say more about that? I think that's a good one, right? I remember going through beginning my personal development and in professional development, and I was having so many issues with what I was learning because I had created these core beliefs within me. They were my foundational belief. They were what the world say is the essence of my being, right? That's what I thought that these things I held true for most of my life. And then when I began to understand that some of these things, some things that I heard and I just held on to and I adopted, then I would go into the word of God and I was like, okay, so cleanliness is next to godliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. I don't know why I'm tripping on my words today. That's not in the Bible. That's something that we heard growing up and it's not there, right? I find myself quoting that sometimes. So I'm just sharing a little bit about my journey. There were so many other things, but that was just the one that I could think of immediately. But then I had this range of emotions and feelings because I felt like I should have. The information was here the whole time. I had it. I had the resource where I could find this information. It was here the whole time, but I didn't know that I was supposed to go to that, and I was just not studying to show myself approved. I was just doing it off of what someone taught me, right? And I'm like, I am too mature at this age for this. You know, the range of emotions was anger, disappointment. There were so many things um, that I experienced because I thought I knew. right? So to that point, you don't really know who you are. You have all these different pieces that someone told you are. Then you got to unlearn all of that. And I'm like, look, they say, older people don't like to make changes, but I'm too mature for this. I don't feel like making these changes. I don't want to. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it. Right. But as Coach said here, having a fixed mindset of a false identity is problematic. And that's what I was fighting against. What I knew, what was told to me. And then I had to realize that a lot of these things I had to undo. I learned a lot of them in church. I remember one of the pastors that I was under was saying, you don't need to read while I'm reading. I would go right home and begin to read because I needed to understand what was being said. That is a form of manipulation. That is not even of God. I didn't know that then, but I know it now. That was years ago. Had to be in my 20s. But just those things, when you don't know who you are, you will listen and receive and accept anything. And so now that you have a understanding, with all thy getting, get an understanding, now those things cannot easily influence you. Did you guys have anything on the comments on that? I'm sorry.
I wish I had sleeves. I'd roll them up. Let you know. I am there. I am right here. For me, everything I was taught to be, it's not necessarily wrong, but it is necessarily a perspective. And because I no longer have my best friend, who is my mother, sifting through that has been difficult at best. And I too find myself fighting a lot of things. And dare you say that they are wrong. But
Wow.
But I know that in order for me to continue to grow and develop, I have to consistently remind and reframe and reshape and sift those things daily. And now I welcome those challenges because it makes me sit and it makes me think. It makes me go to the word. It makes me meditate on those things. Honestly, I'm like, well, can I be adjacent to the word? No, it's got to be exactly as it is. This human flesh is something different. It really and truly will challenge you. And for somebody to rock who you think you are at the core and not even have the rock that gave it to you, that is an uncomfortable place to be in. But it requires me to often go back to that area. I'm in it right now. And it is a work in progress, to be honest. It's a work in progress. But that's a part of the journey, right? Mm-hmm. It's understanding that everything that you were necessarily taught isn't in the word, and it isn't, a black and white situation. And even keeping in your individuality, but I'm there. That's where I am. If I can have that transparent moment. And even though I'm the baby of the panel, I feel like you, Lisa, I'm too old to be reassessing who I am at my core and my foundational principles. But having to sift that every day is work. It's a lot of work. And I'm committed to the journey, though. So y'all handle me with a little grace, but I'm committed to the journey.
I would have to say that I'm so different from you two ladies in the sense that I was rebellious about, you're not going to tell me who I am. I wasn't having it, won't have it now. You can offer your perspective and or your opinion, but as my grandfather used to say, an opinion is like what? Everybody has one. So I am more apt to listen at this big old age. However, I'm going to listen and analyze and write it down to see if those things that are being said are true. I've always been rebellious. I don't know why. I've always been rebellious, but I have. And I have been sat down a lot by the Most High because of that rebellion. However, I don't think that I would have it any other way, because I can appreciate the person that I'm becoming versus being told by someone else who I am. So although the work is hard, I'm ready, willing, and always able to do the hard work because I want to be the very best that I can be. And in doing so, I have to take what they say to me with a grain of salt and really listen out for what the Most High is saying to me about what they're saying to me. So that's all I have to say about that.
Ladies, I really, really do appreciate you. I think this was a good conversation. And I want to say that we were wonderfully made in his image. So it's getting back to what is his image in his likeness. What is it? And that's the discovery, that the journey that I think that we all are on together, discovering what his image is in his likeness. And I'm so thankful because there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much that we're learning in this time, in these moments. And I hope that something that we have said was beneficial to someone who may be listening, because that is our purpose here, is to help us come together, be stronger and healthier, and I think it's Romans 12:2, and be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, if you feel like you're in a place where you want to be transformed, again, I want to go ahead and shout out before we do our final thoughts, the Total Mindset Shift. If you could put the banner up for our communities so that we can share that information with anyone. And then if you have your phone, if you're looking on the phone, you can do a screenshot of it and the banner for all of our shows. And you can do a screenshot of it, or you can go to totalmindsetshift.com to be a part of the community where we're growing, and we're trying to help each other to be the very best that we can be. And so if you are interested, something that we said stood out to you, and you want to be a part of this community, we would love to have you. You can help us grow, and we can grow together. So our final thoughts, and we want to thank everyone in the chat. You guys are phenomenal. You guys help us through this. This is our first premiere of Hearts of Women, and we are so excited to be here, and we look forward to seeing what God is going to do in the future. We really do. Thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity at the community and at Coach. Thank you so much. So now we're going to go into our final thoughts. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you so much for being here this morning with us as we take this journey as the Hearts of Women. I just want to let you all know that the journey to self-discovery is not easy. It can be very painful at times, but the work is necessary, and it is necessary for us to grow. I am committed to the journey. I am committed to showing up and being transparent. And if you would like to know more about our community, please reach out and contact us. But the journey to self-discovery must start with you wanting to walk closer to the Most High. And I'm committed to the journey, and I hope you come along with us.
Well, wonderful topic of conversation, I would say. And I would leave these thoughts with you. Reflect, reflect, reflect. Reflect on what you were told. Reflect on what you're telling yourself. And most of all, reflect on what the Most High is saying to you. I think it's imperative that we find our way to ourselves through the Most High and His Word. I think it's imperative that we sit down and have the unwanted conversations with ourselves so we can find out what those weaknesses are for them to become strengths. So again, reflect, reflect, and reflect. And remember, be kind to someone today, because you never know whose life you may change. You're on mute, Lisa.
Thank you guys so much. I have really got all these lights on me. I'm over here. I have really enjoyed this conversation, and it's sobering, but it's exciting. Change and awareness and understanding, I think, is so exciting. And to me, it seems like there's so much life that we can perceive from growing and learning, because every day that we are here, we are learning, or we should be, or we should desire to be, because we can never say that we're perfect. I had an issue with perfection, trying to be perfect. But now I understand that perfection is something that I will never obtain, because Christ already was perfect. He was. And then once I become perfect, then it's time for me to go be with him. And I'm not ready to do that right now. So I want to say that we have to be kind to ourselves. Place ourselves in communities where you desire to grow, where people can be authentic and be honest, and we can grow together, because we have the very best intentions for you. I also want to add, in closing, before we close, that you can find us on TikTok at Sunday Brunch. You can search for me, the Voice of Reason, on TikTok, or you can search for the Mindset Coach, or Tawami Gaddy, and Tawami Gaddy at 11:30 tomorrow morning. We have a lot going on in our community, and we always try to make sure we enjoy ourselves. We have fun, we laugh, and we're lighthearted. So we thank you so much for taking the time and spending this morning with us to unpack some things about ourselves, because the journey is all about us. Right? It's all about us being responsible for our behavior. That's what this is about. This what self-awareness is about. It's about us being mindful of our behavior and not blaming anyone else, because that's unfruitful. It's not going to benefit us at all. So we have to take the time. If there's things going on in our life that don't seem comfortable, then we need to stop and say, okay, it's time for me to do an assessment. Sit down, write out what you need to write out. Think about your thoughts. Think about what you're thinking about, and begin your journey. We are here. Come over to the Total Mindset Shift website, and we will welcome you with open arms. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And until next month, we will be putting out the announcement for our next Hearts of Women podcast, and it will be next month in October. So thank you again.